Welcome to Go Solo Live.
Don't you mean Go Solo Live? Have you ever been asked, why on earth would you travel alone? Go Solo Live not only answers that question, but celebrates life as a midlife solo traveler. This is a safe place for women to come together to reminisce about their travels, encourage others to travel, and to dig into the real lessons learned from these journeys. Now join Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel as she and her guests share stories of the solo travelers of midlife women.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel, and welcome to Go Solo Live, or as I like to call it, Go Solo Live. And it's our chance to get stories from midlife solo women travelers and really create some community around this solo travel and making that question of, why are you traveling alone? An outdated question. We want that to become old-fashioned because traveling solo is actually the choice for many people, and I want to continue to show that on these blabs and podcasts. So our guest for today is Kelly McDermott, and I'm going to have her start by introducing herself and just a little bit about where she's from, and then we'll dig into some questions. Kelly?
Sounds great. Thanks, Jennifer. My name is Kelly McDermott. I am currently in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I do many different things, but my website is www.pathlesstaken.com, and there's links to all sorts of fun social media platforms from there. And I met Jennifer as part of her group, and recently have been returned from some extensive travel, most of it solo, just this winter. So I'm excited to be here and talk about what that's like.
Awesome. And so we have about 30 minutes set aside for the show today. We'll go as long as it needs to cover what we're covering, or as short if necessary. But mostly it's really to get to know our travelers, and maybe you get to know a little bit about me and what I do. But I just want to help you see that you're not weird if you're not, right?
Well, you might be a little weird, okay, but it's a good weird.
Yeah, it's a good weird. And there's a lot of us weirdos out there. So Kelly, one of the first things I want to talk about is oftentimes when people start traveling solo in their midlife or start taking extensive journeys at midlife, there's a reason. Mm-hmm. There's some life events that have gone on that have said, you know what? I need to just get away a bit. I need to go figure some stuff out. Can you tell me, before we talk about where you went, can you tell me a little bit about where you were at when you decided to go?
Sure. Yeah, that is very true. It seems most people who are out there traveling, midlife, definitely have something that sparks it. Most people I met had a story along those lines. For me, I did go through an upheaval a few years ago. Went through a rough divorce and was really up in the air as far as what next. The good news is I had a really great supportive environment and family, and actually my work as well. And I switched to a contract position, and I knew that contract was coming to an end at some point, and I had to make a decision whether to stay on permanent or to explore other options. So some time had gone by. I wouldn't say I was in the state of mind where I was, the classic running from something or, necessarily searching for something. But what I did realize is I had an unlimited amount of freedom. And while I was through a lot of the emotional turmoil and the psychological effects of that, I had that kind of epiphany, like, it's yours. You can do what you want with it. What do you want to do? And that really sparked it for me. And at the end of that contract, I decided I was not going to go back permanent. As much as I loved my job and the people I worked with, I finally had that opening that we don't get very often, where I could really go. And I know that'll spill over into where I went and why. Don't want to preempt you too much. But yes, I think that does have a lot. And I think in some cases people are going through an emotional or psychological upheaval. I feel like for me, there was a bit of a different spin on it. But whatever works for people, it's that shakeup that makes you realize that if you don't do it now, you might not ever. And what will you ultimately regret more? So
I love that. So a couple of things that I heard when you said that is part of it is like carpe diem. It's time to seize the day, right?
Definitely.
And you also looked at how all the stars were aligning for you of, relationship had ended, contract was ending, very supportive family. And so it's like, okay, so I think the words I heard you say were freedom and choice.
Yes. And I think a lot of times when people travel solo, a lot of people automatically assume that they're running from something or they're finding themselves. And that's not really what it's about in a lot of cases. Some sure. But I think it's that realization you do have freedom. You do have a choice. Usually something went crazy wrong, unexpected. But you realize you have a way of dealing with that. And you seize on what makes you happy. And there is something about solo travel that really brings that out in you when you are kind of going through that and trying to sort out, what you want, regardless of whether it's on people or not. It'll show you.
I agree. And I really appreciate you mentioning this whole part of where we're talking about this idea of running away. For some people, I define a bit in my book about the difference between running away and going away. And I think the difference is really what's your purpose and your intention as you're doing that. And they're two very separate journeys. But the reality is, I think originally, there are some people who take that first trip in a bit of a runaway mode. And then when they go back on another solo trip, it's like, oh no, you don't get it.
It's completely different. It's different.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you're running away, and again, there's nothing necessarily wrong with running away whatsoever.
Absolutely.
Sometimes that gives you the space you need. But when you're running away, it's going to be much more off the cuff. It won't be thought through. It won't be, in terms of logistics and what you really want to get out of it and that sort of thing. And I think that's a big determining factor. You can easily run away. I'm not saying I don't do it. I definitely do it. But the difference is when you are seeking something different, when you really are choosing that from a different state of mind, there is a lot of planning that goes in. There's a lot of logistics that goes in. There's a lot of thought that goes into it. This wasn't something that was planned overnight. This was something that was planned over the course of a year. And that kind of lends to that whole, when people were like, oh, you're running away. I'm like, if I was running away, I'd be gone. I'd be planning on leaving 6 months from now.
You bet. You bet. No, that's a good point. This was thoughtful. This was planned out. It's a very conscious choice. It's not a fight or flight mode type of response. Excellent way to describe that. I think that makes a big difference between, the various people who will be listening in as this is live on Blab as well as on a podcast and things like that. People will be identifying with those various stages, and we'll continue to have those conversations. So
good.
The fun thing, I think, is when everybody says, well, where'd you go? Why'd you go there? What'd you do? So, give us the rundown of what this itinerary looked like, and give us we'll talk through some of the stories that really made it awesome.
Yeah, and it really was. So the way this started was I knew the contract was ending, and I decided to say, well, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to take a trip. I'd always loved traveling. I hadn't gotten to do much of it outside of the U.S. In recent years. And so it started with one of my big three. My big three were always Inca Trail to Machu Picchu, Egypt and Jordan, the pyramids in Petra, and the third one was Angkor Wat in Cambodia. Those are my big three.
Absolutely.
And then I started looking at it. And again, this takes a lot of advanced planning. Saying, well, I could do all three. And which roughly works out to about 6 weeks, if you're hopping 2 weeks in each place, give or take. And then that turned into, well, while I'm in the neighborhood, why don't I check out this and this? So this whole thing kind of, expand. And this is why when people are like, you're running away, I'm like, no, definitely not running away. You should see the spreadsheets I have for this. I'm a planner, but I also held that in check because I knew, you're going to get to a place and there's going to be those unexpected surprises. People always assume that's a bad thing. More often than not, it's a very good thing. Where you're going to want that flexibility. So I set, my benchmarks as far as my main flights, and there were a few places I met up with, a group with a travel company. I have my favorite, and they're small groups, and I still don't know anyone. I'm still kind of getting in and getting out on my own and that sort of thing. Sometimes have a chance to explore more just on my own. But once I had those in place, then I had deadlines where I had to be somewhere by a certain time, which definitely helped, or I probably would still be in Peru, a year later, having made it, not beyond that, which there's nothing wrong with that. But the intent of this the intent of this trip was to really cover some ground and see some different things. And I did some very drastically different landscapes and climates, and people just amazing.
Well, so we're going to talk about a variety of the pieces that went into this trip. And one of which is, so tell us how old you were when you started.
I was 36 when I started.
Excellent.
And I stayed 36 throughout.
Perfect.
Well, I might have reverted back to 30 at certain points, but
Amen. I think
travel seems to make you younger.
Younger at heart, and absolutely.
You're much lighter. And it's funny how people would actually misjudge my age fairly often. And I don't think it was anything about me. I think everything just felt lighter. And that comes across as an age thing, strangely enough. Your spirit for sure is lighter.
So you're 36 years old. Certainly, you're not tied to your family by any means. However, how did they feel when you're like, okay, I'm out?
There was a definite range in response. I wouldn't say anyone told me not to go. That didn't happen. Whether that they thought I shouldn't go or they just realized that was a futile argument, I'm not sure. But in the end, nobody said don't go.
That's fair.
Some, right off the bat, were very supportive. This is absolutely the right thing to do. This is definitely you. Whether they had always thought that or just the excitement that would come through talking about it. Whatever made them say that, there's a variety of reasons for that too. There was a lot of fear though. And it was something that I had a really hard time grasping.
Okay.
I really struggled with that. A lot of people, before they even knew where I was going, their first question was, well, is it safe?
Okay.
And then my first response was, is what safe? I ended up going to 15 countries over the time span of, 5 months, give or take, and it's so, and you're talking drastically different environments, and
absolutely.
You also have to define safe, what are you comfortable with? So there definitely was a range, in how people responded. A lot of people actually said, and why I'm really getting into, kind of almost like helping people plan trips and encouraging people to get out, is so many people said, I would love to do that, but I can't. For whatever reason, it's not safe. I can't afford it. I don't have the time. All of these reasons people come up with. And once you start working with them, you realize, no, it is doable for the most part. It's just, I think the kind of underlying theme that drives it is a lot of fear over how, and what will it look like, and will I be okay? And once those questions are addressed, all of a sudden, the money and the time, show up.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so there was definitely a range in it. Some of it surprised me, but yeah.
Okay. So, and again, for especially folks who are thinking about doing this and, you've 15 countries in 5 months, and what were your planned communications and what were some of the things that you did in terms of safety? Because again, for some people who are thinking about this for the first time, they're like, holy cow, okay, I could consider it, but the safety thing, I need that. I need to check the box on that.
Mm-hmm. And there's two different ways to look at safety. One is reassuring everyone else that you're safe.
Yes.
Which often takes far more time than reassuring yourself you're safe. And then, the second part, making sure that you're safe. I think, and this is not to downplay the dangers out there. There are dangers. There's no getting around that. But we also exaggerate those in our own heads when we don't know them.
Yes.
When there is an unknown. Right. Fear of the unknown makes the fear of the unknown drastically more than what it really is.
Absolutely.
And I think paring that back to a more kind of objective, what am I really dealing with? And there's a ton of information out there. We've got it at our fingertips. It is not unknown. Right. The very first place I landed was Mexico City. And I, of course, landed, at like midnight or some ridiculous hour. I've never been to Mexico City before. But I'd done my research. I looked at it and it was, okay, do not take the subway into the city, especially at that time of night. There's a bus service. There's, police on the buses. That's the way to go if you're not going to have someone pick you up or another mode of transportation or whatever. But do not take the subway. Take the bus. I have no idea if the subway from Mexico City Airport and the city center is safe or not because I took that advice.
Perfect.
The funny thing is you don't realize how many people help. Here I am, my first stop, middle of the night, no clue what I'm doing. Mexico City, and okay, I'm taking the bus. Find the bus, the ticket booth thing, and it's all automated. And so you exchange money, and you're getting your bus ticket. And I'm standing there staring at this thing blankly. When the security guys comes up, and another guy waiting for a ticket comes up, and are able to communicate enough and get me my ticket and get me to the right spot, and
Perfect.
The bus drops me off, a few blocks from where I need to be. But that's taking that, doing your research and taking that advice of people who have been there. Absolutely. It is out there in spades. As far as calming everyone else down, that was a bigger challenge. Not as easily researchable, but while I was traveling, we called it Facebook Proof of Life. Every so often, and I'm a Facebooker anyway,
okay.
So it's easy for me. But a picture with you in it in a place, every so often. I probably posted far more than I should, but yeah, it calmed people down. In fact, there was one instance I had been in Thailand, and I was headed to Yangon in Myanmar, and that was the time of the temple bombing in Bangkok. And we'd hit a few of these throughout Egypt. There had been incidences, and other places as well. Mm-hmm. But, I had posted to Facebook, I'm in Bangkok. Well, it happened that a friend of mine who I'd met while traveling was going to meet up with me to go on to Yangon. And even though I hadn't posted, he posted, tagging me in it, saying, on our way to Yangon tomorrow.
Perfect.
So I didn't post. The bombing happened about, a day and a half later. And I got a hold of my mom. She's like, well, I wasn't worried. Tim had posted saying you were already on your way. So I knew you weren't there. So it's amazing how modern technology, and now Facebook has check-ins and, for disasters, man-made or natural, that you can reassure people quickly that you're okay.
Absolutely.
The other thing to do is to have a network of a few people that you can contact quickly and say, I'm okay, spread the word. So that way you're not getting bombarded with dozens and dozens of messages asking if you're okay.
Absolutely.
It's a good way to be able to get word out quickly now. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
And, there's so many resources out there for that help and the research on the safety stuff, the research on the medical side of things. I'm heading to Colombia in a couple of weeks, and just to make sure that I have all the vaccinations and things like that.
There's so much out there that is at our fingertips that can really mitigate that fear.
Exactly.
But you do have to spend the time to do it. It does take some research. So.
Exactly. Or when they're working with someone who's planning the itinerary, that person can kind of give them the rundown.
Exactly. And that's huge. A friend of mine was going to London, and just pulling up the tube map and marking her stop and the stop of major things she wanted to see was reassuring. She didn't feel like when she was walking into London, she'd be flying blind, like, now where, what do I do? And something as simple as that is familiarizing yourself. And, 15 countries, I wasn't going to familiarize myself with every metro transit system out there. But I downloaded maps to my phone. I had, especially with apps nowadays, it's so easy.
My goodness.
Or if you don't have Wi-Fi, you take a screenshot of the system so you at least have it. It gives you a comfort level that we didn't have a few years ago. Much easier now. I feel like it's cheating.
It's not cheating necessarily, right?
We're using what we have at our disposal.
But you're right. You think 20 years ago when people traveled, it was an entirely different.
Oh, I remember using a payphone from a village in Ireland to call internationally and throwing coins into that thing,
And the expectation. The expectation of the family back at home as well.
Very
it's like, well, you might get a letter.
Yeah. I'll send you a postcard. You'll get it 3 months after I get back. It's, hey, I haven't seen you on Facebook in 24 hours. Are you okay?
Right. So it is definitely an interesting and new dynamic.
Yes.
One of the things that I really appreciated about how you did this major trip is you built in your personal solo time, but you also strategically built in some group travel. And you did that for certain reasons and purposes. Can you share with the group a bit about that?
Of course. And I think there is definitely judgment on both sides of that aisle. People who travel in groups have judgments about solo travelers. Solo travelers who refuse to travel in groups have judgments about group travel. They're the best of both worlds, and you can pick and choose. And they can really play into your hand well. Now, like I said, I have my favorite travel company. It's small group, super great itineraries, lots of different options, and a lot of free time within those itineraries, which is big if you like solo traveling. Don't go with a group that you're going to have an 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. by the minute itinerary. You're not going to do well. So find the groups that work well for you. But what I did is I mixed it up. There are certain countries and places that, yes, I was not comfortable going completely solo. Egypt was one of them. Really wanted to get to Egypt. 2011 to now, not great. And so we're talking 2015. I'm there. There's still things going on. But I went with a group. And it just so happened there were only 6 of us in that group. So again, you're not talking, that you're, suffocating under the weight of a group. I really wanted to do Inca Trail to Machu Picchu. The only way to do that is with a government-approved group for government permit reasons. So that was. But then there were those other ones. Cambodia was my last week of travel. And Cambodia, I'd heard, could be pretty rough, especially at land border crossings and that sort of thing. And I looked it up. I'm like, you know what? There's a few-day trip that goes right through where I want to go, hits up what I want to see, give yourself a break. I did the same thing in Morocco, a few days with a group to give yourself that break when you've been going and you're operating. I mean, there were times when I hit Burma, I was with a group for Burma as well, which I was glad I did. At the time I met solo travelers who they were doing it, but it was taking a lot longer to get around. The infrastructure was not there. It's tough. And if you have the time, that's great. But I knew I was running short.
Sure.
But what I realized when I had Burma is I was on my 5th currency in a few weeks and another completely different language. And you're sitting there going, I just want to sit back and not have to think as much. Now, you still have to think. You're still operating in another country, different language, a language you have no hope of reading or understanding.
Sure.
Currency where, you exchange cash and your $100 is a stack of bills like this. You're dealing with some very different things. Give yourself that break. Let yourself sit back and enjoy it a little bit. Take a breather. Gives you time to reset before, you're solo again. So yeah, it's a good way of doing it. And solo travel, I'm a huge fan of being completely on your own. I've met some amazing people that way. And you do things you wouldn't otherwise do. When you're in the group, you're going to stick to the group itinerary more. Another tip is when you're with the group, build in a couple days on either end of it to really go do your thing in that area. Usually at the end is really well. You're already familiar with it. You've got the lay of the land. You've got some good tips. Now you can really kind of dig in on your own if you want. So
absolutely.
Those are the main points on that one, I guess.
So what were the most surprising reactions that you got, maybe from the groups that you traveled with, but more from those you encountered, either other travelers or local, about a 36-year-old American woman traveling alone?
That was the surprise. What's a 36-year-old American doing traveling alone? One, Americans don't travel as much as others. And when we do, we stick to the high spots. And I'm not talking others in terms of, you can look at globally in first world, second world, third world, economic status, on and on. But in terms of other, what we could consider industrialized countries, we are among the least well-traveled, if not the least well-traveled. So seeing Americans out there in general is already a surprise. Seeing solo Americans out there is even more of a shock. And the ones that you do see, everybody's always like, wow, what's your story? Because it is unusual. In other countries, we expect Aussies to take a gap year.
Yes.
There's, at any point in time, I feel like half the 20-year-olds in Australia are in a different country. It's the norm. But it isn't for the U.S. And so when they do see Americans, there is that a surprise. Now, add in the fact of being a female, and it is shocking. To people in the groups, they were very accepting. The kind of theory, although I was told this by a raft guide in West Virginia, was that people who travel solo, especially women, are crazy. Whether they're really crazy and need to stay away from them, or cool crazy is yet to be determined. I will say the vast majority of them are cool crazy. They're very, that's the way it goes. But he's got a point. It's so rare. People automatically assume there's something going on. For locals, and I tell this story about Egypt a lot, and Burma was the same way, but Egypt was the big surprise. Egypt, it almost felt like being a local celebrity. Or non-local celebrity.
Sure.
They were so excited to see an American female there. It was almost, and I don't mean to put words in the mouths of an entire country, but the people I ran into, of course, are in the tourism trade, and tourism is devastated in Egypt right now. They see an American woman, that means dollars. That means somebody thinks it's safe to go, to come visit them, that not everybody thinks of Egypt as being this horrible place that you can't go to. And there is a bit of a symbol of hope in that. Burma was much the same way for different reasons. There it's all new. There's a palpable excitement in the air when they see Westerners in general.
Okay.
I think there's definitely, a bit of a message that is sent. Now, in other countries, that can be also a bit more dangerous. A Western woman traveling alone does have a certain persona, but the more confident you are in yourself and the more you trust yourself, that becomes a non-issue. So the culture definitely plays in. So.
Well, you put a lot of planning and intention into this trip. So if you had to say what the highlights were, what I think almost like the surprising highlights, like, Machu Picchu is going to be amazing.
It's going to be amazing no matter what. Right.
But what were like the sneaky little surprises that were highlights?
Here's my rule of thumb for people who are traveling. Definitely go to the museums, go to the Louvre if you're in Paris, you have to. That won't be the highlight of your trip unless you're an art history major or this is your passion. The planned things, while they're great, they rarely are the things that stand out because they're expected. It's the unexpected that stands out, both good and bad. For me, there were so many crazy moments. Off the top of my head, a couple that stand out, again, the bizarre ones. I showed up in Edinburgh in cargo pants and hiking boots, coming from Ireland, which I'd been in and out of a ton, but had to go back since I was in the neighborhood. How in the neighborhood applies from, being in Peru to Egypt, I don't know, but we'll, pass through on the way. But I show up and I'm, check into the hostel, and this girl walks by me on the sidewalk, leaving the hostel, and ask the girl at the desk, I just need to grab some food. Where do I go? And, there's a pub right here. And okay, cool. Go like 2 blocks over, walk in, again, still in cargo pants and hiking boots. And the girl I'd seen at the hostel was there as well. And we're just listening to live music and having a drink. And so we started talking. She's from Brazil, studying in France. Before we know it, there's a table of guys a bit away, and they kind of keep looking over, and we're kind of laughing about it. And turns out they're 2 French guys and an Austrian guy. And it turned into this night. We were there until close. The guys were like amateur ballroom dancers. So now you've got us like learning ballroom dancing in a pub in Edinburgh at 1 o'clock in the morning.
What?
Somebody set up some random social, I swear it's a random social experiment. And they set up in chalk, a hopscotch thing on a median in one of the main roads of Edinburgh. So now you've got 5 people, 4 languages, arguing about the rules of hopscotch, and while slightly inebriated, trying to demonstrate hopscotch. Crazy fun night, totally unexpected.
That's awesome. And it wasn't about somebody making sure to catch it on video so that they could post it to social media.
We tried to snap a couple of pictures. They're so blurry. You can barely tell what they are.
There you go.
But yeah, and one other one I want to throw in there that really stood out was in Egypt. I was having a rough day. They happen. I was with the group. I kind of shut down. One of my fellow travelers, we got to be really good friends, noticed it. We kind of did our thing. And that night, I was just not ready to, call it a night. It was just a rough day, and I just didn't want to dwell on it. And I was like, I don't care what you guys are doing. There's a cafe a few doors down from the hotel. I'm going there. And it's hookah, nargila, whatever you want to call it. Okay. And food and drink. And so, we were done. He's like, okay, I'll go with. And so a couple of us were there. It ended up him and I for a little while. And, we're having our shisha and just sitting there relaxing. And out of nowhere, and I mean, they've got like, top 40 music playing, like American Top 40 type stuff. And out of nowhere, this giant Minion and Patrick from SpongeBob SquarePants cartoon, like you'd see at Disney or, whatever, show up out of nowhere. Like, so completely random.
Hi.
And they were there dancing around for a good half hour, 45 minutes. We did get video of that one because no one's going to believe us.
Right.
It was the most random thing. And when you're at the end of a rough day and you're seeing this happening, you're kind of like, what is in the shisha? Like, are you seeing what I'm seeing right now?
That's awesome.
It was hilarious.
Awesome.
And it goes down as one of the most random things I came across. You can't plan for stuff like that. You just have to go with it. And by going with it, I mean, you have to get out. There were bad nights where I just was like, I'm not leaving my room. But there are those bad nights where you're like, no, I think I've got it in me. Yeah, go. Because those are the nights. Yeah, I always say the way to have the best night and the way to make sure you don't sleep until 4 a.m. is to say, I'm just going out for one. That's the kiss of death right there. You are going to be out all night. But that's seizing on that and just going with it.
I love that. Well, Kelly, we're getting close to the time to end, and I have a couple more things that I want to put out there for you. The first question is, can you share any of the key learnings of what you learned about yourself on that trip?
Yes, sure. I think one of them is you do take yourself wherever you go. Don't forget that. And although I knew it, you definitely realize it. And this is why I scaled back my itinerary in terms of what I was going to do in each place. Pick a couple highlights that actually mean something to you, and then let the rest unfold. Because there's nothing worse than getting through a gorgeous place and being like, okay, I checked everything off my list. That was fun. Do things you care about. For me, I'm an avid reader. I like my downtime. You can't book a 9 to 9 itinerary, every day without building that in. You're going to burn out.
Absolutely.
And have more faith in yourself than you give yourself credit for. And I was pretty confident starting out, but like I said, Mexico City, I had that first night down, like get in, get the bus, do this.
Yes.
Yeah. And I was talking to a friend of mine as I landed in Ho Chi Minh City on a whim. My visa had come through at the last second. I was going to be there for 24 hours. It was
all right then.
crazy. And he messaged me, again, modern technology. He's in New Zealand. I'm in Ho Chi Minh City. And he's like, have you figured out where you're going? I'm like, well, I've got the hotel name. And he's like, how are you getting there? I'm like, I don't know. I'll grab a taxi. He's like, what's the hotel name? I don't know. I've got it written down. It's an airport. There's going to be taxis. There's going to be, you've got it written down.
Absolutely.
The planning that goes into it definitely helps in terms of giving yourself that kind of confidence and, that comfort level. But then you realize there's certain things you need to worry about. There's certain things you don't. And taxis at airports are not one of them. There will always be a taxi at an airport.
Amen. Thank goodness for that, right?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, my last question for you is, why would you recommend a solo travel journey of any sort, whether it's as extensive as yours or maybe just going to a cabin for a weekend? Why do you think that that's a good thing for someone in their midlife to take some time to do?
One, I think in our midlife, we are so tied up in other things. Our day-to-day, we pride ourselves in being busy. And it's busy with our to-do list and paying bills and doing this and doing that. And even the things we do for fun end up on our to-do lists. I'm notorious for this.
Absolutely.
And, it's like, oh, go out to dinner tonight. Come on. Like, everything is like, breathe in, breathe out. It's in our minds that we have to do this. And I think when you travel solo, you start to get away from that a little bit. And you actually listen to what you want to do. I prided myself by the 3rd month in. I realized I haven't written a to-do list in 2 months, 3 months, and
that's awesome.
That's crazy. I've got to-do lists of to-do lists when I'm at home. So it's unplugging from that and getting back to just having fun. I laughed more in that 5-6 months that I can remember laughing in a very long time, because we don't laugh. We don't lighten up, especially not for any length of time.
Absolutely.
So I think that really does that. And it also, the second part of that is, it's one of those things that doing something solo, not only are you paying attention to yourself more, but you also open yourself up to other people and other experiences more. When you're with someone, it's that dynamic. When you're alone, you don't have that dynamic. It's really about you and what you're wanting to do in that moment. You want to sit there and sulk, you sit there and sulk. You want to go have a drink, go have a drink. You want to play a hopscotch in Edinburgh at 2 o'clock in the morning, play a hopscotch in Edinburgh at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's really up to you.
That, right?
Oh my gosh, so much fun. Right? Still swear someone's sitting there taking notes like, oh my God, these guys.
Exactly.
Which is completely fine. But yeah, I think those are two of the big things, is really unplugging and really just doing what you want and need to do in that moment without the tug and pull of everything and everyone else.
Absolutely. I think solo travel is almost the ultimate form of self-care.
Yes, I would completely agree with that. And that's why I think when people say you're running away, I'm like, well, running away can be self-care. But there are also a lot of other methods of self-care. And we don't check in with ourselves often enough to know what we're really doing here.
Absolutely.
What are you going to remember at the end of most days? Not a whole lot.
No. And yeah, making memories like this that you'll be able to share for forever is quite impressive.
And that's one of the things I really, I hope to spread it. Like, get out there and make the memories. That's what's going to stick with you.
I love it. Well, Kelly, you made a lot of memories, and I think you've done a lot of writing along with this, and you've only shared the tip of the iceberg with us. Can you please tell our listeners how they can connect with you or where they can find you after they listen to what we've shared today? Of
course. I was miserable at blogging while I was traveling. It's very tough to do while solo traveling, by the way, if you're moving a lot. There's certain places you don't want to whip out a laptop on a bus.
True.
But I did take the chance. I do have a new blog that's launching. It's at www.apathlesstaken.com. There's also Facebook and Twitter and Instagram connected to that. And that's going to, in hindsight, this is the way to do it. Not only can I merge my personal experiences, but also looking at them in the light of a lot of what we talked about, things you don't think about while you're traveling, but definitely have that impact and are good to consider, whether it's practical logistical tips or just kind of mindset and what this really means after the fact as well as in it. So I'm looking forward to sharing that and hopefully encouraging a few others to get out there and give it a try.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on Go Solo Live today.
Thank you for having me.
And for those who are listening, you can find out more information about Go Solo Live at www.transformviatravel.com. You can find us on our Facebook page at Go Solo Live, as well as Transform Via Travel on Facebook. And you can find recordings of the podcast and videos for you for future reference. And if you're interested in providing any feedback, please reach out and contact me. I'm Jennifer at transformviatravel.com, as well as share this with others. We're looking to grow this community of solo midlife women travelers. And what I really want you to remember is that even though you may be traveling solo, you're really not alone. Thank you, and I hope to see you again soon.